Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead. Greg Soulje is back with us today with a look at the weather. Welcome, Greg.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Nice to be with you here in some parts of the Corn Belt. A welcome rainy day. Others are still worried about some quality loss issues mounting because of heat and dryness. And speaking of that is still playing out on through the Plain States. So we'll take a look at that, the weekend rainfall and prospects that we finally see the last of these organized rains. It's taken a little while, but we think the transition to warmer and drier, and maybe if you don't get what you need out of this thing, how much showing up on the maps and charts as we get deeper on into tomorrow and beyond the new month of August.
Very good. Speaking of maps and charts, yours are up.
All right, and here we go on this last day of July, summertime racing on by. And this particular weather system across the middle part of the country, the western Corn Belt back into the plains, kind of lackadaisically moseying along here the next few days. Stirring currents typically weaker this time of the year, but a pretty well-defined comma-shaped system. At least this will tend to be and generate more garden variety rains, if you will, as opposed to kind of the most recent batch of severe weather that clocked parts of the Great Lakes region, the Midwest, and points southeast early on into the week. You can see a little cloud area all across the northeast of New England and rise above the sort of the core of the heat really across the high plains of the west, along the divide and into the west coast. There's a stirring currents up aloft and married to little wiggles and troughs making its way in a what we call closed off upper low. Kind of unusual, but it's an unusual weather pattern shaping up around here. And this thing kind of cut off the main steering current, so it just will take its sweet time if you wanted any extended dry time for whatever reason. This weekend out of the Corn Belt, especially the Midwest and eastern areas, forget about it. But your rain gauge may be pretty much bountiful around here. We hope that most of this will be of a absorbing, percolating variety versus the severe weather and some of these 1 to 2 and 3 inch rains that happen in about 60 to 90 minutes like we had a few days ago. Shower activity down across Florida into the northeast and New England. There's the surface map, dual lows across the middle part of the country. Low pressure kind of deepening and slowly auguring to the south and east over the next 48 to 60 hours out of Iowa and heading towards the Ohio Valley. There's the visible satellite picture. The clouds encroaching the southern Great Lakes region. The bumpiness indicating some of the polar cloud tops where we had some heavy rainfall into parts of Minnesota. Some flood watches still and up and effect there at the current time. Everybody else in relatively good shape, and some of the gauges so far at 1 inch to 2 inches west and south of the Twin Cities, but the radar on top of that, and there it is, western Wisconsin closing in just around and top of the Quad Cities, Galesburg down to the Illinois River, and from there southwest to St. Louis. So a pretty far-reaching area, and everything is kind of propagating from northwest to southeast, not a west to east movement, so it's taking its time, and some of those bands will continue to follow over the same areas, but kind of broaden its reach to the Midwest as we move through the next couple of days. There's the surface map this morning making its way, the showers and thunderstorms into the western and southwestern sections of the Corn Belt, Mississippi Valley. So these rains in the Mississippi Valley and points westward helping to stabilize crop conditions that have shown some quality loss, particularly from Michigan through Wisconsin, more so northern Illinois, and westward into the western Corn Belt areas. As of the 26th of July, 46% of the crop conditions, soybeans, were rated into the good category, 61% through Nebraska, national average at 63, and the numbers are a little worse in areas of, again, the northern and western Corn Belt, coming off the spells of heat and dry weather. So once again, drier, these thunderstorm outbreaks that turn heavy and severe end up doing more bark and biting than anything of significant improvement to soil moisture levels. There is the drought monitor across the Midwest as of a couple of days ago, yesterday afternoon. Now moderate back into play, northern Illinois, extending through southern and southeastern Wisconsin. The moderate in pockets of severe as you get up across the northwoods of Wisconsin, back through the western third of Iowa, and northward across much of Minnesota at the current time. But at least while it is wet, it's a drier air mass down from these absolutely miserable dew points that we have earlier on in the week, anywhere between the low 80, mid to upper 80 degree range, just unbearable for man and beast. On the plain states, Heat rapidly expanding back across the Dakotas, west of the Red River Valley of the North on westward. Up in temperatures back through Big Sky Country, heart of livestock and grain country, up near 100 this afternoon. So winter wheat harvest, yeah, favorable for that. We do need more rain for these winter wheat fields once we get the planting and sowing going here later on this summer and fall season. We think with El Nino, that will certainly help on out. Plains States is considering to deal with more than 50% short and very short in some of the topsoil moisture levels from the Dakotas down to Oklahoma and points on westward. If you squint, you can see some of those readings up near the century mark, if not beyond, across Montana, the high plains areas, mid to upper 90s, away from the rain areas, centered on Kansas and Oklahoma, heading towards 115 to 118 in the desert southwest. Meanwhile, across the southern states, some shower activity across the eastern Gulf Coast areas, heat and high humidity levels from the Delta on westward, a little more manageable off to the east. We've seen some modest improvement to dryness and drought over the southeastern sections of the country off a recent rainfall. Ways to go through the mid-Atlantic region and, of course, down through Florida. There is the national perspective, and you can see through the Virginias, parts of actually much of the Carolinas in pretty tough shape with lots of the extreme through worse drought levels into the Carolinas, better through Georgia, worse through Florida, kind of a disappointing outside of the past week to 10 days rainy season down there, and up the chute from the lower lakes region down into the Ohio Valley, with the exception of Arkansas, relatively good shape. And of course, the northern and western Corn Belt back in the plains, you can see the shades of beige and red there. The monsoon setup temporarily weakening as the hot dome realigns itself more so into the desert southwest for the next couple of days. Speaking of which, 115 from the lower desert locales into parts of New Mexico and Arizona. So not much rainfall chances there with the realignment of the upper air pattern. And fires continue to be the story, building through the Pacific Northwest over the past probably 10 days to 2 weeks. Some of that smoky plume that we experienced in the Midwest, well, that is firmly ensconced in the Northwest. And we're not done, by the way, with dealing with some of those smoke-related jet stream mixing down issues as we move along here for the next 60 to 90 days or so for openers. So they're battling fires in the Pacific Northwest, 4 million acres of fire acreage burned so far this year, 130% of the 10-year average. Put that in the back of your noggin. Pacific Northwest, there is the fire concerns from at least critical to extreme, more so as you get into Washington State and areas east of the Cascades and through Oregon. No rain outside of either side of the divide, not much organized rain, but severe weather. That means big hail and parts of livestock country, the Texas Panhandle and New Mexico. There's the rainfall making its way out of the western Corn Belt into the Midwest, including much of Illinois during the afternoon in through tonight. Pretty solid, good to general coverage is expected. That will continue in through tomorrow morning. The rains will take on a little more of a showery on and off, but more on than off nature. There's tomorrow afternoon building through Michigan, the rest of Illinois, Ohio, and Indiana, and increasing over the southeastern part of the country, and still lollygagging as late as Sunday afternoon. Some of these rains across Indiana as well as Ohio, and the rains generally in a good and favorable setup from an accumulation standpoint. The next 48 hours, generally 1 to 2, some pockets of 2.5. Hopefully, most of this comes down in a prolonged, protracted basis to allow for some absorption and percolation where you did happen to pick up some of the severe storms out of eastern Wisconsin, where there's cleanup going on there, northeast Illinois. Some of these rains may come down and will re-aggravate some ponding water in the fields if there's been green snap or some lodging and blowdown that happened off those 80-plus mile-an-hour winds that came through that part of the country in the Midwest early this past week. Any severe weather should remain down from about Quincy to either side of St. Louis, the Mississippi, into the Missouri Boot Hill for the day-to-day, then shift into the Tennessee Valley in that area of yellow, at least slight risk of severe weather in the Tennessee Valley tomorrow afternoon and evening time. Over the next 5 days, the upper air charts kind of shape up like this. There's that upper air trough, that U-shaped configuration. And if you don't have a lot of, let's say, lines around it for simplification purposes here, it's not going to move a whole bunch in a hurry. It may linger in the Tennessee Valley and Ohio Valley as late as Monday and Tuesday, finally lifted to the northeast of New England. You can see kind of a flattening out and a strengthening, as you would expect for August, across the Pacific Northwest, Southern Canadian Prairie, and into the Lakes region. So a little more progressive nature to the weather pattern here, but with upper level high pressure from the southwest into the southeastern states, two things: wind shear and minimal Atlantic hurricane stuff going on for now. Probably stays that way, active in the eastern Pacific, mind you. That little low you can see, by the way, over around Baja by Tuesday, that's a new tropical system. The waters there in the eastern Pacific are warm. You move westward into the California current and more into the open waters of the Pacific. That's when you tend to see these things try to wind down. Sometimes Hawaii takes a hit with a big rain system or two from time to time. So in any event, there'll be a couple of boundaries, a couple of fronts of the move into the northern interior states with not a lot in the way of any organized moisture going forward there. The next 5 days on the surface, weather maps and charts, you can see a system making its way between Monday and Tuesday across the northern plains. Great Lakes areas by Wednesday kind of trails off, then kind of stalls on out. So there is probably the thinking of our next at least scattered shower thunderstorm scenario over parts of the far eastern and southern Corn Belt and Ohio Valley, and hopefully to the eastern states towards the late portion of next week and beyond. The next 7 days across the area, more of the significant rains shifting into the eastern states. After this particular weather system, rains tend to take on a little more scattered nature again, and a drier pattern shaping up for the northern and western Corn Belt, Mississippi Valley, and continuing on through the plains. So there it is over the next 5 to 7 days, 1 to 3 inches of rain for the Midwest. That system will take until early next week to get the Ohio Valley. There will be some additional welcome rainfalls into Florida, the Panhandle primarily, Cotton Belt country through the southeastern states and mid-Atlantic region. Otherwise, just hot, dry weather, capped off atmosphere in the southwest and Pacific West. A couple of scattered showers into the northeast of New England. High plains along the divide, the Pacific Northwest, southwestern part of the country, 100, 105, 110, maybe 115 by the time you get into the lower desert. And temperatures will recover back to or a little above seasonal norms across the Midwest going forward after these weekend and early next week rain systems make their way, of which we'll keep daytime temps tomorrow in the 70s. That's it. For the Great Lakes region into the Ozarks, you can see the heat back there through Big Sky country, 95 to 100 plus there, extending into the desert southwest. That's Saturday's perspective, still dominating a little farther east, 100 to 105 degree heat across the plains. Heads up livestock operations, a little more manageable West Texas, mid-90s there, but a mix of 70s and 80s across the Great Lakes into the much of the Corn Belt, coolest southern lakes region to east of the Mississippi. By Monday, still temperatures are muted by the cloud cover, lingering shower activity in the eastern Corn Belt, while you see in Big Sky country a significant cool front in that west to east faster upper wind flow. So we're going to at least knock the ridge down, flatten it out, focus it across the central plains and southwest. Temperatures will hover into the 70s and lower 80s in the northern plains, 70s and 80s across the nation's midsection, and 70s and lower 80s and still from the northern plains and across the northern and eastern Corn Belt as late as Wednesday and Thursday next week as the heat reestablishes itself into the northern and central plains. Some of that cooling across the middle part of the country. Remember that cutoff low, that cutoff upper circulation or trough. So things are slow to move in mid-late summertime in the steering current. So the reason in the air sounds pretty good and reasoned with temperatures certainly cooler than average, then back to seasonal norms. 6 to 10 days, again, no official endorsement, but for discussion points and purposes, right idea. Broadening, large-scale, hot ridge, capped atmosphere, blocking high. There's a bunch of correct and incorrect ways to mention it, but the hot ridge, the heat ridge, extends from California, building back into the southwest and southern Corn Belt in the next 6 to 10 days. Pretty much of the country above average, with the core of the unusual critical heat from the four quarters into the central and southern end of winter wheat, as well as the central and southern Corn Belt. Not much going on in the way of any organized moisture. This would be primarily into the early days of August into the easternmost Corn Belt, the northeast of New England. That's monsoon moisture redeveloping in the desert southwest. Otherwise, expanding dryness issues again through the plains of the Pacific Northwest and a clear wind and going over the rest of the Corn Belt. Push it out the next 2 weeks, and this is the right idea for now, with the hot ridge kind of migrating, starting to move. Weather patterns take on a little more progressive nature as we get later in the summertime, but still extending from about Salt Lake City into the lower Mississippi Valley and northern Delta and southeastern states, and systems riding the top. So there may be some of these ridge-riding thunderstorms that come back in out of the Dakotas and across the Great Lakes region, but not a lot of any organized moisture. So enjoy the stuff. I'm sorry the timing comes out during the weekend, but it is what it is. Again, no real significant cooling for now. We talked about this in our last live stream that heads up as we get into the early couple of weeks of the month of September. And right up the middle, as you would expect in this particular setup, not much going on in the rainfall department. So not much opportunity here, Sarah, for any organized rains in the plains to get them ready to go for winter wheat planting. Or after this, and it will be welcome moisture, there should be maybe a little bump in quality. Maybe markets will react to it coming out of the western and northwestern Corn Belt and across the Midwest for the weekend, because after this, there's just not a lot going on forward here as we start finally building into this warmer, drier scenario. Our next update live stream is on the 25th, Tuesday, on 1 o'clock Central Time. So until then, like I tell people on the radio, just skip plan B. You'll have to go to plan C and D this weekend. I'm sorry about the rain. But it will be far more docile, as we've been talking about on the radio, far more manageable, soaking, percolating, absorbing a rumble of thunder, but none of this widespread wind damage, bow echo, 80-plus mile-an-hour winds. I had enough of that earlier on in the week there, ma'am.
Very good. All right, Greg. Thank you so much, and we'll check in with you next week to get another update.
Have a good weekend.
You too.